If it's up to me, Ron definitely next. We somewhat got, you know what I mean, everything and going in the right direction. So we just waiting for, you know what I mean, Ron to accept on his side and let's get the job done.
Finally, we are going to see it. The long-awaited confrontation between Gervonta "Tank" Davis and Ryan Garcia. A story that has been going on for several years now and is coming to its final act, and it is truly exciting. The last obstacle in the form of Hector Garcia has been destroyed, and now there is no one to stop fans from enjoying the delightful spectacle that these mutual-hating guys will put on in the ring.
And now, ladies and gentlemen in attendance and boxing fans joining us around the world, live from
it's over! It's Garcia! Let his hands go!
And a hook, and down he goes!
This is over. There is a new tank for the 135-pound division! This kid is a superstar!
Friends, today's video will be a technical breakdown of the Garcia-Davis fight. Let's try to figure out if King Rai is able to outclass his eternal rival, or if Gervonta is still better than the overhyped boxer. Please don't forget the likes and the forward comments. Here we go! The history of the conflict between Garcia and Davis starts with their featherweight performances. Many agree that it was during those years that Gervonta was at his peak. Indeed, the Tank destroyed all the living things in his way and knocked out every opponent mercilessly in the early rounds, and there was not even a slightest hint of competition in his fights. As he moved into heavier categories, Floyd's apprentice gradually began to take fewer risks, and in his last fights he turned from once ultra-aggressive first number into a counter-puncher. At the same time, the change of his usual strategy was not detrimental to the American, it just made his style more restrained and balanced. As I see it, it was not because of Davis's decline, but because of the increased level of opposition. We can only see 2 or 3 big names in his featherweight record, but beyond that, Gervonta has collected the scalps of the real elite, like Mario Barrios with 26-0 record, or the champion in 4 different weight divisions, Leo Santa Cruz. Yes, in his last 2 appearances, the Tank has matched up with more down-to-earth, but nonetheless undefeated and fairly promising athletes, all of whom he knocked out in the process. The only thing Gervonta lacks is stability in his personal life. He left his promoter and mentor Floyd Mayweather not too long ago to develop himself, and just a few days ago he almost went to jail for his girlfriend slandering about domestic violence. It seems like the guy is trying to get his life in order, but so far he's struggling, which cannot be said about his future opponent. Ryan Garcia is the kind of guy who always does great. He appears in front of the fans every time smiling and in a great mood, but in the ring he hides his kindness and turns into a real killer, a Terminator with a goal, to knock out his target. With all that, Flash is quite lean and tall, there is no knockout power in his body, but Ryan consistently delights the audience with spectacular finishes. He started to get the early wins in his conquest of the featherweights division. At that time, Garcia was very young, but he was very talented and a hardworking athlete, and everyone was pointing at him and saying he had a great future. By the way, at that time, a potential confrontation with the current champion Gervonta Davis seemed to many people as a real mismatch. Ryan was seen as too raw of a boxer. Over the years, people's opinions began to change considerably. King Rai has gotten stronger, his punching has gotten even sharper, and the main thing that attracted the most attention remains with him. Of course, we're talking about Garcia's phenomenal, I would even say abnormal speed. There are dozens of videos on the internet showing the miracles of his hand speed, but all that would be meaningless without a confirmation in the ring, and the guy is incredibly good at it. Often, opponents don't even realize where those painful and heavy blows are coming from. Well, it's time to look at the nemesis in terms of technique. Technique. Both boxers are true natural talents. Of course, it's impossible to achieve such results in the sport with just innate talent. Ryan and Gervonta had to work hard day and night to develop their skills, but both are fully gifted with some features. For example, Gervonta is an unmatched knockout master whose punching power is quite comparable to cruiserweights or even heavyweights. Davis's entire physique tells us this guy can chop, with short but very powerful arms, constantly charging and shooting like a spring. The guy really reminds me of Mike Tyson at his best, except he's a lightweight. In addition to the frightening power, the champion has a first-class technique and the ability to wait for the right moment, which he developed over the years. The early tank is aggression in its purest form. Tireless, relentless, always going forward and throwing real nuclear missiles. That's exactly what kind of featherweight Davis was. In a category above, Gervonta over time even began to resemble his teacher Mayweather with his dodges and brilliant defense. It's hard to hit the Baltimorean because his head movement is on a really high level, and when he sees the very first gap in the opponent's defense, the tank immediately unloads with a straight hand or a hook with his strongest left hand. The only unsolvable problem the champion regularly faces is his lack of size. This is the age of giants in the lightweight division, and Davis's size plays a cruel trick on him. Even with his huge speed advantage, he often lacks a couple of centimeters to reach his opponent's head. Remember we discussed natural gifts? As you probably realized, for Ryan, it's his signature speed. You can endlessly work on your reflexes and skills in the gym, but to achieve such results without a predisposition, in my opinion, is impossible. Garcia and his coaching staff are well aware of their strongest side. That's why they built their whole style of flash based on the speed aspect. What are we talking about? For example, Ryan quite rarely uses the classic block. Instead, he prefers to rely on head movement and body work. Once the Olympic boxing champion Luke Campbell punished him for that by knocking him down. Since then, Garcia has been more focused on his defense, but his head movement is still there, and the young talent relies mostly on it in the long range. Speaking of the main techniques in Ryan's arsenal, we can't help but mention his fantastic work midsection. In every fight, he causes troubles to his opponents with it. For example, Javier Fortuna, who was concentrating on a punched liver, got knocked out by a punch to the head, and Luke Campbell got hit by a horrifying uppercut to the body and collapsed right away. Among the blows to the head, we should mention the left hook, which is the main one in the kid's arsenal. He may use for a retreat as well for pressure. It makes no difference for him. The punch is very sharp and often invisible, but it has a lot of power. I also think it's important to note Garcia's anthropometry at this point. King Rye is a big lightweight, which is often a problem for his opponents, because unlike most, he knows how to use his size. Against Davis, anthropometry will be a major stumbling block for Gervonta. Endurance and mentality. There's not much to say about cardio in this fight, as both guys are perfectly functionally ready. Each of them has never once in their careers had any serious endurance problems. Davis manages to wear down and outbreathe his opponent in almost every one of his performances, after which the knockout invariably comes. During a welterweight appearance, the tank crossed gloves with champion Mario Barrios, and then only through his stamina was able to eventually reach and cut down his inconvenient opponent only in the 11th round. Garcia, in his turn, never runs out of steam, even though his moves are energy intensive. No matter how much he must fluster around his opponent, Ryan will feel chipper and confident, as if he were in the first round. In this aspect, I see parity between the guys, and I give it a 50-50 split here. I don't think anyone will run out of steam here, even after the heavy exchanges. In terms of mentality though, things are a bit more interesting here. The fact is that each of them has a lot to lose if they are defeated. And it's not just about the championship belt or a 0 in the loss column. I'm talking about their long-standing rivalry. They've been feuding for years, and during that time, they've had to taunt each other for a variety of reasons. Now, when they're finally brought together in the ring, one of them will have to stay behind, letting his offender get ahead, and something tells me that this might hit the loser hard mentally. In Ryan's case, I think he can accept and process the defeat, draw conclusions, and come back a better version of himself to go after the titles again. I can't say the same about Gervonta though. I've already mentioned the Baltimore finisher's life is a mess right now, and the mental state he'll be in for one of the biggest fights of his life leaves a lot to be desired. And what will happen to Davis if he is defeated by his nemesis? Let that question remain open, but I think the tank may not be the same after that. As far as mentality goes, I think Garcia is the favorite. Prediction. It's always hard to make predictions because anything can happen in a fight, especially when we're talking about nuclear knockout masters like Gervonta and Ryan. It's safe to say that the height and arm length of the Flash will be a headache for Davis. He's not able to break through to close range as often now as he used to, although I think the tank often just doesn't want to take risks and patiently waits for his finest hour. But he shouldn't do that in this fight because while waiting for his chance, Davis might just stand there for too long, and Garcia might just outshoot him for points, which the latter might well do using his footwork and a jab. Davis can solve this problem by returning to his early work strategy of being an aggressive first number. If that's the case, I'm pretty sure he'll be able to pin King Rye at the ropes and shoot him in the body, gradually moving to the head. The main thing here is not to catch a hard counterattack, especially a left hook. And what can you suggest for Ryan's fight plan? The guy should focus on active movement and being always in the center of the ring. Garcia, once he's in the middle of a fight, can push Davis to the edge, but he must be constantly on his guard, not to chase the sly tank, otherwise he might repeat Romero's fate, who trusted himself and swooped in for a fatal counterpunch. Ryan will need to pull Gervonta on himself, strike in those moments, and respond to single or even a series of punches with his head movement and displacement. Due to his height, Flash will have an advantage in defense, and making him tired like many previous opponents, Gervonta is unlikely to be able to do so. What do we have in the end? This is a very close and incredibly competitive clash between two top lightweight stars of their time. Each has just a ton of leverage and counterattacks on their opponent's strikes. If they had made this fight 3 years ago, I would have seen Gervonta as the unconditional favorite, but now that Garcia is approaching his peak, I think he might be able to take on the tank. Ryan is essentially a stylistic, uncomfortable opponent for Davis, and given his high level of training, mental toughness, and built-up experience, I think the Flash will show the world just how good a boxer he has managed to become. My favorite to win this fight is Ryan Garcia.